Maybe she's a fucking genius, Michael. Maybe she's a genius. These were the words of the great Dan Leonis, my friend, creator of the incredible Einstein Blueprint. If you have children, grandchildren, this is a program that has completely transformed our lives in terms of being parents to our 10-year-old daughter. Krista and I have both used the teachings in the Einstein Blueprint to improve and transform the way we teach and lead our daughter Emery. But the greatest gift that Dan Leonis ever gave us, and I've told him this story one time, but I'm not sure even he understands the incredible impact those few words have had on our entire family. But I'll tell you this story so you'll better understand the impact that one person can have on a family, on a child's life, the impact you can have on a child's future. It's just incredible, the impact that you can have, both good and bad, when it comes to our children, our teenagers, even adults. When my daughter Emery was 7 years old, one of her teachers, not a school teacher, but one of her teachers, one of her coaches, teachers, contacted Krista, my wife, and said, you know, I've been teaching Emery for a year now, and I notice that she has issues focusing. And of course, I mean, this is a nightmare email to get from any teacher, let alone a mother gets that email that their son or daughter has a problem focusing. So Krista sent me the email, and I was like, wow. I was like, because we're all aware of the ADD, the ADHD, whatever you want to call it, so-called epidemic with our children today. Children age 4, 5, 10, 12, 16, 18, right up till adulthood, medicated and sedated because they have attention deficit disorder, they have trouble focusing, they have trouble sitting still, especially young boys. In my daughter's class here in Naples, at the private school here, 2/3 of the class take daily pills, medicine, whatever you want to call it, for this so-called disorder. 2/3 of the class, these are mostly boys, little boys and girls age 5 to 11. Think about that. 65% of her class gets up in the morning, little children, God's gifts, and they take a pill to lower their energy, try to improve their focus, medicate them and sedate them. 2/3 of her class, 65% of her class, 66% of her class, medicated at age 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So when parents get this information from a teacher, it scares the shit out of us, right? It's designed to scare the shit out of us. And that's where it comes from most of the time. It comes from the school teacher. It comes from the teacher who's got 25 kids in in their class, and they've got some children, mostly the boys, who are a little unruly. They got ants in their pants. They can't sit still. They're hard to manage. I've coached this age group from 5 to 25 for 22 straight years. I understand what that classroom is like. No different than a locker room, never different than a gymnasium. Teaching is teaching, coaching is coaching. I understand this age group extremely well with 22 years of experience. But nonetheless, when I read this email, I had just started reading the Einstein Blueprint. I had purchased the blueprint from Dan, and I was going through this massive binder. To let you know what the Einstein Blueprint is, it's for parents that want to hyper accelerate their children. Some of them homeschool. We chose not to do that, but it's all kinds of things that just hyper accelerate your child. There's a real emphasis on entrepreneurship, which I love. How to not push entrepreneurship in your child, but to inspire it, to inspire freedom and control and wealth, even at a young age. Like Warren Buffett says, the main common denominator, Warren Buffett says, between rich and poor, successful and unsuccessful, is how soon we start our children, how early they get started. So the Einstein Blueprint is about everything. It's 101 insider secrets that Dan's put together through his own personal experience. He has 2 teenage children. So he went through this entire process personally, which he documented with these 101 tips or insider secrets, whatever you want to call them. And it's just next level. I mean, I didn't know half of this stuff when it comes to raising your children. Everything from health, nutrition, mental toughness, time management, cursive writing, the importance of math, the importance of family history, storytelling, never screening your children, never having them on any type of screen. And one of the areas that he talks about a lot is the attention deficit disorder, ADHD, all this other stuff. And so when we got this news, it really strikes you. You're like, is there something wrong with my child? Like, does she have problems focusing? And like all children, I mean, Emery has ants in her pants, right? And she has high energy. She gets up at 5:30 every morning. She goes to bed at 8:30 every night, and in between, she's just nonstop. She's blessed with energy and vitality. So I get on the phone with Dan, and I'm scared, right? I'm like, well, this teacher has said that my daughter has problems focusing and when she's taking her lessons and blah, blah, blah. And they think that she might, she should see a specialist or an expert. They think, she should be tested for ADHD. I can't even say it. And he lets me talk for about 10 minutes. And then I'll never, ever forget it. I'm sitting in my vehicle. I'm parked in the field at the lake. And finally, Dan, I'm done talking. I'm nervous, whatever you want to call it. And he goes, I'm given all these things, problems that she has, they say she has. And he says into the phone, or maybe she's a fucking genius. Or maybe she's a fucking genius. My life changed. I snapped out of it. I got back to my normal badass self. My wife was the same. Maybe she's a fucking genius. And Dan, I booked an hour with Dan later that week. on a Zoom call. This was during the lockdown. And Dan spent an hour with her doing math drills, literally math drills. I've never seen anything like it. I recorded it. I was present during the training. It was like nothing I ever saw. It was like I was running a hockey practice. It was like I was running a power skating Tuesday practice. It was insane. It was just go, 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 move, 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 think, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. The pace was like nothing I'd ever seen outside of athletics, where I see it all the time. And it was just math drills, pen and paper. Okay, list this, add this, subtract this, divide this, what is this? And after an hour, she was done, mentally exhausted. My daughter had never been through anything like that. Dan said, I'll get back to you in a few hours. So, and he gave her some homework. All good coaches give homework. Dan and I get on the phone in 3 hours. And he talks and he's like, Michael, he says, first of all, let's get this clear. He goes, ADD, ADHD. He said, it's bullshit. It's all fucking bullshit. He goes, there's 1% cases where there's issues with children with their, there's medical and psychological issues. That's 1%. He said, but 99% of it, and he said, you and your wife need to understand this, it's bullshit. It's manufactured mental illness by the mental illness industry. It's a billion, if not trillion-dollar industry of medicating our children from the age of 4 all the way up to the day they die. And this is a guy who's worked with thousands of boys and girls. He's the self-proclaimed greatest math teacher on earth for a reason. What I saw, I'd like to see who's better. So he talks to me, he says, sure. He says, sure, your daughter has high energy. Sure, she has ants in her pants. Sure, she has problems focusing on things she doesn't care about. He says, but I just had her focus for 61 minutes without any interruptions whatsoever. She performed at an elite level, and he said she's 7 years old. She sat in that chair, she did math drills for 61 minutes. She's high energy, high IQ. He said she's a 7-year-old little girl. And if that's a problem, if that's something that you want to medicate, if that's something you want to sedate, he says, I don't know what good is supposed to look like. He said this is rampant, especially in little boys, ants in their pants, teachers having a problem in the classroom, controlling it. What do? He says you contact the mom or the dad, especially the mom. They go to an expert, a specialist in the mental health industry, i.e. a therapist. What do you think they do? Well, I've tested your son. He has problem focusing. What 5-year-old or 7-year-old little boy doesn't have problems focusing, especially in a test with an expert at a clinic? Well, you have some options here, but it wouldn't hurt to take these drugs daily. It's going to help him focus. It's going to calm him down. It's going to sedate him. It's going to allow you to get more stuff done. It's just going to make him more manageable. It's going to help you. It's going to help you control him. It's like talking about a piece of furniture or something. We're going to manage the child. So he said, Michael, can I give you a book reference? And I said, well, of course, I'm a reader. Leaders are readers. He said, buy Dr. John Rosemond's book. He says this guy is hated, despised in the mental health industry. He is despised by therapists, pill and drug companies, big pharmaceutical. He is despised by the mental health industry. But he said, put that all aside and read this book cover to cover. He said, it'll change your life. And the book, which I've read twice, is called The Medicating of America's Children. The Medicating of America's Children. And John Roseman is his name. If you're not a reader, I'm going to attach the podcast, the actual podcast below this. I'll put it in the PS in this email, and I'll put it below this video. And it's the podcast. It's about 45 minutes, and it's an interview one-on-one that Dan had with Dr. John. And it might be the greatest podcast I've ever listened to in terms of mental health when it comes to children. And the guy is a genius. He debunks all the myths. He debunks all the nonsense. He slaughters all the misinformation. And I've never heard a person, a doctor, go as deep into this so-called, epidemic with our children. The medicating, the diseasing, that's the name of the book. The diseasing of America's children. In other words, we're medicating and sedating our children by the millions. You think kids ever get off that shit? Do you think kids ever get off that garbage? Those toxic pills, mind-altering pills? They start taking those things at age 4, 5, 6. You think they ever get off that stuff? That stuff is a mental and physical and emotional and soul-crushing crutch. Then they get to 18, they got to go on antidepressants. There's something wrong with them, right? They've been told their whole life there's something wrong with them. It's not their fault. There's something wrong with them. It's not mommy's fault. It's not daddy's fault. There's something wrong with this kid. It's a medical issue. So then they go on antidepressants. They get into their 20s. They combine that with alcohol and drugs, video games, porn. All of a sudden, got to increase the dosage again. I'm suffering from depression, anxiety. I can't leave the house. I can't leave the basement. I don't have a job. I don't go to school. I'm 24 years old. I'm living in mommy's basement. My dad really isn't in my life. I'm underfathered. I don't play sports. I don't go to the gym. I don't move my body. I don't go outside in the sunshine. I don't read books. I live on a screen. I've been on a screen since I was a year old. I've got 25 years of digital dementia, 18 hours a day on a screen, social media, bullying, texting, TikTok, you name it. Garbage in, garbage out. Garbage in, garbage out. So this is how the playbook is run. So I highly recommend you buy that book, John Roseman, The Diseasing of America's Children. And if you're not a reader, the next thing, please check out that podcast below. I feel as a good morning. I feel as a father that it's more important now than ever before for me to share that podcast with you. I'm not a podcast guy. I don't like to be on them. On top of that, I just, I don't listen to a lot of audio podcasts. I'm a reader, but that's one that's made such a difference in my life that I need to share that. So I'll put that in the PS and below this. My God, make sure your wife listens to that. If you have kids, teenagers, young children, even if you don't have kids, there's people in your life you need to share that podcast with. Think about your grandkids. If your kids went through this, you've got to reprogram their thinking before they become parents, before they get pressured and bullied. It's a shaming industry, right? ADD, ADHD, it's a shaming industry, right? You know, I felt ashamed. I felt like, what did I do? What did Krista do? And then you go to the expert, and admittedly, she was a person we knew very well, and she didn't push us down that road. But I regret the fact that I even opened that door. I regret the fact I feel incredible shame and weakness for, you know, I should have been a lion. I should have been a king. And I was ignorant, and I was weak. And I felt ashamed. I felt shamed. And that's the game, though. That's what I found out. That's the game, right? It rattles you when you hear a teacher say that your son or daughter might have issues with attention, high energy, and then all of a sudden the game begins, right? And then when the expert tells you, listen, you know, it's not your fault. There's no connection between screening your kid, which my daughter's never been on a screen. That's a relief for the most parents, especially the mom, right? Oh, we thought it was us. We thought it the fact that, you know, he plays video games all day and he's in a video game league. I had a mom tell me the other day, her kid who does have ADD, whatever, he's got ants in his pants and he takes pills every day. He's 7 years old. He's in a Saturday morning video game league where they keep the standings. Dad's just a dunce, right? Checked out. Never tossed a football, never tossed a baseball, never went for a walk. And here's mom. She's got this 7-year-old who's been diagnosed with ADD, and he's in a video game Saturday morning league. You imagine? Tomato can heaven. We live in clown world. So interesting also is Dan's response to boys and girls that have these so-called symptoms, high energy, problems focusing, ants in their pants. And he said some of these kids, because he's worked with these kids, right? He'll have, it doesn't matter where they come from, but he's had millionaire kids, parents call, billionaire parents call. I mean, he's got students, especially math students, all over the planet, and as private or in his math coaching program. Emery's in his math coaching program. It's like Nick Saban's football camp. It's like Michael Jordan's basketball camp. It would be like going to a Andrew Carnegie children's business camp. It would be like going to a Dan Kennedy young entrepreneur seminar. Like, it's the best of the best, right? So he talks about, he said, I love working with these kids that are so-called, you know, ADD or ADHD. He goes, I call it relentless energy. He goes, they're my best students. He says, show me a young boy or a young girl that has relentless energy. He says, what do you want your kid to have? Do you want your kid to be a slug? You want your kid to be a sloth? You want your kid to be, you know, low energy? And Dan admits, he says, you know, one of his kids has, his own personal kids has amazing relentless energy, right? And he goes, one of my children, he says, is very successful, but he's not blessed with this relentless energy. He's not blessed with relentless energy. He says, I would pay $1 million for that. He goes, try and sedate it and medicate it. He goes, are you insane? He says, I would pay to bottle that and give that to one of my children. He said, you know, one of them's lower energy and one of them is high energy. And he's like, man, that high energy, that relentless energy, he says, is good morning, is something, he says, you can't put a price on. He says, if you could bottle that, he says, I would buy that for $1 million for one of my children, and here we are medicating and sedating it. Think about the madness in that. Oh, your kid is high energy, he's bouncing around the classroom, I can't get him to sit still, I can't get him to focus during history class when we talk about something that's 400 years old. But here's the thing, Dan says, in his entire career, 30 years teaching math to kids from all economic backgrounds, all over the world, Asians, Chinese, Americans, Canadians, you name it, every type of person from every corner of the earth. When the parent calls with the ADD story, with the shaming, like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? A teacher says my kid's got, attention span problems. They want to put them on pills and medications and medicine. He said there's not been one exception in 30 years that the kid hasn't been screened, put on a screen since they were a young child. Nowadays, that's as a baby, right? The baby's sitting in the seat, the car seat with dad's cell phone. A baby, or a 2-year-old or a toddler with mommy's cell phone while she drives or eats her lunch. They don't know, right? They just handed their kid a bottle of scotch. Worse, they just handed their kid, their baby, their toddler, their 5-year-old a vial of heroin. Worse, they just handed them a beer and a cigarette together. But worse, they don't know, right? They're ignorant and they're stupid. I call them as I see them, right? So I was ignorant and I was stupid in the beginning. Stupid is permanent. Ignorant is something that's fixable. So I fixed it by studying men like Dan Leonis and his Einstein blueprint. And it didn't take me long to see, wow, this is a scam. This is one of the biggest scams that in today's manufactured mental illness. This is how they get millions and millions and millions of Americans and Canadians onto mind-altering drugs in the first place. They start them at age 4 and 5 and all the way through their life. Well, you should be happy. If you're not happy, my God, there's something wrong with you. Here's a pill. Well, you're entitled to be happy. Every day should be joyful. If not, we need to look at you. By the way, here's a prescription. So that's the world we live in. But as a father, man, all I can say is you need to be a lion. You need to be a king. You need to be joined at the hip with your queen on this. You need to read that book from John Roseman. You need to listen to that podcast below. And you need to protect your children. And you need to protect your grandchildren that you have or that are coming down the line. My God, the shaming will continue. Your children will be shamed as parents. Johnny's got ants in his pants. He's bouncing off the walls. He's not good at math. Oh my God. We have an expert coming into the school who wants to test your kid. And boy, oh boy, I was amused at the test. What a dog and pony show that stuff is, right? If I had a job like that, I would shoot myself. I'd hit myself dead in the head with a hammer. If that was my job to go around and test children for high energy and for motivation, and then sit there in a chair and honestly believe that I'm helping by medicating them at age 7, I'd hit myself dead in the head with a hammer. I would just be like, I can't live with myself. So Dan has a remedy for these kids. He says, before I work with your kid, because they come to him, right? And they're like, whatever the cost is. A lot of them are very, very wealthy families. And these kids have been in private schools, right? And the private school thing hasn't had any impact either way, right? Oh, I send my kid to private school. He should be a really good student. But now they say he's got ADD or ADHD. And so they call up Dan and they're like, what does it take? And he's like, well, listen, number one, I won't work with your kid unless you de-screen him 100%. I won't work with your daughter unless I de-screen her 100%. And he says that's where 95% of the conversations end. The parent is like checked out. They've already sold out, right? They've tapped out on that. They phoned it in. They've mailed it in as a mom or a dad. So they're like, oh, that horse is already out of the barn. You know, my kid's been on an iPad. My kid's been on a screen since they were 2, you know, and now they're 11 and they got all kinds of problems. So he's like, it's like crack or it's like alcohol. I'm not going to try to help an alcoholic or a crack addict. I'm not going to help a screen junkie. I'm not going to help them unless they go cold turkey. So 0 screening. Every pad, every phone, television, the boob tube, every laptop, every screen has to go. And then he insists on like a 30-day digital detox before he works with the child. He's not going to work in a situation he can't win, right? Without the de-screening, he can't win. So he recommends and prescribes a 30-day digital detox. Never hears from them again. Never hears from them again. They go the pill route. They go the medication route. They tap out. They phone it in. They mail it in. They tap out and they quit on their kid or their grandkid. And that child is medicated for the rest of his human life. Like that shit, my friend Gordon Quinton said to me when Emery was born, he has 2 great kids. And one of his son, who's a very successful kid, he's been at a couple of my hockey training camps, really tremendous kid, lots of grit, lots of intelligence. He's runs his own landscaping company at age 22. Just, you know, he's going to do great things. He's just got it. And Gordon said to me one day, I think Emery was 2 at the time, and he said, just off the cuff, we're talking on the phone. And he said, Coach, he says, just out of the blue, he says, whatever you do, he said, promise me, you'll never, ever, ever consider putting your kid on that shit. And I was like, she's 2 years old. I said, I don't even know what you're talking about. I've heard about it. I've coached kids for 22 years. I've never even really considered it. I've just coached my athletes. I don't really know if they have so-called problems or not. I coach all my athletes the same way. I coach them auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. I know the 3 ways that people learn. I said, I've never asked a hockey player. I've never had an issue with a hockey player, a young child or a young adult. I've just always expected them to pay attention and learn, and they have. He said, man, he says, someday somebody's going to come and say, your kid's got this or they got that. And he said, just promise me. He says, you'll never, ever, ever put her on that trash. And I was like, okay, you're talking about pills and stuff. And he's like, you will lose her. He says, you will lose your child to that stuff. He says, you will lose her into that black hole. She's 2 years old at the time. So I kind of never thought about it anymore, right? 5 years later, and we get that email from a coach, somebody teaching her one of the things that she teaches, one of the things that she takes. By the way, that coach is long curated, swift sword, dead to me, never spoken of again. So all I can say is, man, oh man, the stakes couldn't be higher. These are your kids and these are your grandkids. Could the stakes be any higher? Like, I can give you a marketing idea or a business idea that'll make you money. I can get you in better physical shape and mental shape, tell you a book to read, but oh my God, this is probably the most important message that I can share. Maybe she's a fucking genius. And here we are, my daughter's 10 years old, and we've been told by lots of teachers that she has 2 or 3 gifts. She's gifted in 2 or 3 areas. I'm good at 2 or 3 areas, and I'm lousy at 200 areas. So it's an interesting story. My daughter has an obsession and passion for art. That's why she's got this dog walking company. She loved drawing the flyers. So she's 10 years old and she's made over $1,000 cash. She's 10 years old. She's done it all herself. All I did is I walked the dogs with her. So since she's been in Naples here, and she came to me and wanted to start a dog walking company, she's got $1,000 in her piggy bank. She has 3 piggy banks. She did the flyers, she photocopied them, and she handed these flyers out in this neighborhood to 100 homes, and she got a 4% response. 96% non-response, so 4% is winning, right? And she's got 4 customers, and she sells them 6 walks for $25. And after school, she comes home now and she walks a dog almost maybe 4 or 5 days a week. She has that. So she got a little part-time job, but it's her running her own company. And she's starting an art YouTube channel in another year. She's already done some, good morning. She's already done some videos. She wants to teach other children how to draw. So she's following her passion and obsession, right? She loves animals, loves horses and cats and dogs, so she's dog walking. She loves art, so she's drawing all these direct response flyers, and she loves being outside. It's funny, Dan Leonis said to me, he goes, these kids that so-called behavior issues or ADD or whatever, he says, Michael, he says, they just learn differently. He says, they're my favorite kids. He goes, they have voracious appetites to learn. He says, they come to me at 5 and 10 years old, 15 years old. He says, they're sponges. These kids are sponges. And he says, as a teacher, all I have to do is transform how I teach them. They learn a little bit differently. He says a lot of them are visual learners, but most of them are kinesthetic learners. We only learn 3 ways. You're either a person who learns by listening, you're either a person who learns by seeing something visual on a chalkboard, on a whiteboard, on a smartboard, or kinesthetic, which the great football coaches like Jimmy Johnson and Bobby Bowden and all those guys, they actually make the athlete do it. Okay, square out and go, and then they walk the person through it. That's the only 3 ways human beings learn. So when I run a webinar or a training or a mastermind, as an example, every single point, I say it for the auditory learner, I show it on a slide for the person like me who learns by visual. I'm a visual learner. And I also show them, physically show them, and get them to imagine it happening. Your feet are here, your arms here, your hands are on the keyboard for the kinesthetic learner. But Dan says, man, Michael, a lot of these kids are kinesthetic and they're thought to be dumb or stupid, or they can't learn in a traditional classroom. And he says, all it is the traditional classroom isn't set up for the kinesthetic learner. That's where you find your area of genius. A lot of, like Einstein's parents he was sent home from school because some of the teachers said that he was retarded, that he had a severe learning disability. He was removed from school. You go through all these great people that had dyslexia, like Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful on Shark Tank, talks about his severe dyslexia, which is a real thing that really hurt his image, his confidence in his image. He thought he was dumb. He thought he was stupid. He thought there was something wrong with him. And it took him years to get over that. And I've read so many autobiographies and biographies of the great people that changed our world for the better. And so many of them were thought to have learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, a lot of this manufactured mental illness. Well, he's not very bright. Einstein, Beethoven was deaf. The great Beethoven was deaf. Like, my God. So run from these people. As a father and a grandfather, oh my God, run from these people. It's the devil in disguise. These experts and this industry and these doctors that prescribe pills to children, that's the devil in disguise. He comes in many forms, but that's one of the forms he comes in. I walked out of that day at the clinic and I was like, holy fuck. I just met with pure evil. I just spent time with pure evil. Look at that sunrise behind me. Life is a gift. Look at that. Every day you have a chance to go 1-0 today. This will be 34-0 for the year, where I've walked, I've copyrighted, done my marketing, and sharpened the axe reading. So I do my road work, I do the copywriting, Operation Money Suck, and I do my sharpening the saw reading. And I get a red X on my calendar, but look at that. Look at that behind me. It's minus 41 degrees Celsius where we live in Canada today. Minus 41, do that math. That's like, I don't know what that is. Minus 41 degrees Celsius. And here today, we're gonna have a sunny high of plus 85 Fahrenheit. So about, I don't know, 32 degrees Celsius here. So from minus 40 to plus 30. Man, personal sovereignty never looked better. So one last thing, Dan, I talk about how a top 1% teacher or coach, he says, Michael, he says, these kids work the best, high energy. He says they work the best at stand-up desks. So he tells the parents to get them stand-up desks. And he does these math classes. I mean, I swear to God, it's like a Coach K basketball practice. It's like Bobby Knight is running a basketball practice. It's just hardcore. And he has these kids, he has the parents, he's like, get them off those screens. And he says, get them off those pills. And he says, like, do a detox. And then he says, get a stand-up desk. So he has these 5-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 16-year-olds working every day, math drills. Emery does it in the summer every day, 6 days a week. Stand-up desk. He's like, get them moving. He says these kids with so-called learning disabilities and attention deficit disorder, they come back to life after a 30-day digital detox. He says they come back to life. The other thing he recommends is physical exercise, which most of them never do, right? He's like, they need to be outside in nature. Like as if this is groundbreaking. They need to be out in the sun. They need to be out in the wind. They need to be out in the rain. They need to be out in the cold. They need to be out in the heat. They need to be out moving. That's why we do our road work. This is not groundbreaking. We don't need to be medicated for that. And walking and movement is mental, it's physical, it's emotional, it's spiritual, it's everything for the child. So motion creates emotion. Good motion creates positive emotion. Tony Robbins 101. And he said also some of these kids work extremely well on the floor like they do at Montessori, where my kid, she just sits down and she writes a book report on the carpet at school. They don't sit at a desk at Montessori, right? There's no desks. They sit in chairs, they sit on a couch, they work their asses off. It's not what you would think, but they're not sitting at a desk all day. So my daughter has excelled in Montessori. It's like she'll do her math drills on the floor. She'll stand up and she'll do a book report. She'll read standing up or sitting in a chair. So Dan just talked about all these strategies he has as an elite coach for these types of kids, special kids. He's like, Michael, they're gifted. He goes, some of them are geniuses. So I'll finish this up with a little story about 2 days ago, my daughter gets her report card. She gets her report card and they go through the child. It's numbered now. A's, B's, C's, and D's and F's were too offensive, right? They're long gone. Even though that's how I grade my hockey players, A to F, every single game, every practice. I'm old school, man. I'm out of date. Now it's 1 to 4. So I said to Krista, I said, just give it to me. I'll read. What the fuck does 1 mean? She's like, well, that's below average, and 4 means outstanding. Okay. So 1 is an F, and 4 is a. It's outstanding, right? Something like that. Don't want to offend the parents, the cupcake parents. It's not the kids. So we read my daughter's report card, and they print these things out, right? Like it comes across as like, oh my God, this 8-page document. But it's just fill in the blanks, right? It's just fill in the blanks. So God forbid any cursive writing from the teacher or any, one-on-one comments. It's just a chart. It's just a glorified chart. Get it done in most cases. Just get it done, right? There are amazing teachers out there, amazing teachers. And there's a lot of ones that have just tapped out, sellouts. So same in any industry. You got your kings and you got your poodles. You got your contenders and you got your pretenders. You got your lions and you got your sheep. Call them as I see them. My show. So I read in this report card with Krista, and Emery's like me. She's better. She's better than me. I was a D and F student. I have 2 university degrees I have a psychology degree. That I took that because I wanted to be a gym teacher. If the hockey coaching thing didn't work out, then I could be a gym teacher, wear shorts to school every day and teach basketball and baseball and all this other stuff. So I got D's and F's all the way through, but I ended up with 2 degrees. I've talked about that. So my daughter she's like, in her subjects that she doesn't have passion and obsession for, she's got like the D's, she's got the C's, basically 2s and 3s, okay? That's average, ordinary, mediocre, whatever you want to call it. But it's interesting because in the things that she has a passion and obsession for, the couple of things or 3 things that she's gifted, you're gifted in 2 or 3 things. And then the rest of it just doesn't matter. And you're not good at it and you'll never be good at it. Like when it comes to art and all these things, she's like 3s and 4s, right? Mathematics, 3. Her mom, she has her mom's brain. Krista is a science and biology high school teacher. She doesn't teach anymore. She didn't like the teaching industry anymore, so she took her integrity and walked away 15 years ago. I said, if you don't love it, get out of it. And she did, to her credit. So Emery's science and biology grades are 4s, right? A's and A pluses. But the best comment is, and this showed that she is an outstanding teacher at home in Canada. Outstanding, 2 of them. The best I've ever seen. And coming from me, that's a pat on the back. And the teacher said, she is a world-class storyteller. Wow, did that make me smile? Because Krista's concerned, right? She's like, you do okay, but not great. You don't push yourself in history class or whatever. You could do better at this, right? Your spelling could be better. And I have an entrepreneur's mind, right? I was a D and F student in my family. My brother was a better student. He's a successful lawyer with his own firm, but he wasn't anything to write home about as a student. My sister has my mom's brain. She was a dedicated student, and she is a head nurse, good morning, at the Heart Institute. So she's been very successful, but she doesn't have any entrepreneurial gift. She doesn't have the dreamer's disease, like my dad would say. My younger brother has the dreamer's disease. He runs his own show. My dad said to me when I was 12, he's like, oh shit, you have the dreamer's disease. I was trying to figure out a way to sell lemonade better or sell my mom's pots and pans or all this. It never relented. My dad's like, oh my God, you have the dreamer's disease like me. So when they said about the storytelling, I read that yesterday. Mark Andre would laugh about that because I'm in the storytelling business. Like, what are these videos? I take you on a mini adventure every morning. That's all it is. It's a story. It's something that's happened in my life that I share with you personally that I haven't really shared before. I just tell, I share a story. I tell you stories about my grandfather, my mom, my dad, my kids, my wife, my clients. I just tell personal stories. I don't care if you like them or if you're offended by them or if they're too harsh or too candid or bad language. I just tell you an authentic story. What's my book? My How to Not Get Your Ass Kicked in Business and Life. You can get a copy at nobullbook.com. That's nobullbook.com. 25 rules, 25 stories. 25 stories. From my pro and amateur coaching days, my lemonade stand selling days, window washing days, 25 rules, 25 stories. What do I do in my paper and ink newsletter every month, my world building letter? Badassletter.com, by the way. If you're not a subscriber to my paper and ink newsletter, I think you do have brain damage. Badassletter.com. $3.24 a day. Bum on the street can afford that. Badassletter.com. What do I do in that every month? Tell teaching stories, world building stories, marketing stories, wealth accumulating stories, win, losses, frustration stories, entrepreneurial stories, marriage stories, fatherhood stories, fitness stories. Interesting. Same thing with my masterminds. I have 2 masterminds, World Builders, badassworldbuilders.com and badasschampions.com, like top guys. And it's pretty interesting because the best trainings are teachings through stories. You know, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me. This is what you can learn. This is a mistake I made, but all teaching through stories. The great college coaches, the great NHL coaches, the great NBA coaches, the great NFL coaches, all amazing storytellers, right? Bobby Bowden, the king of the living room back in the Florida State days, he would just go in the living room as the greatest recruiter that maybe ever lived and just get in there and tell stories to grandma and grandpa. Get in there and tell stories to mom and dad. Send me your kid, I'll make him a man. Same thing with Bobby Knight, just an amazing storyteller. Every speech was a story. I'm reading Jimmy Johnson, Dallas Cowboys, two Super Bowls, national championship with the Hurricanes in Miami. Holy storyteller. Every practice, he'd tell the men a story, the boys a story. Every pregame speech a story. And his memoir, which is the book I'm reading right now, is just story after story. Just story. Jerry Johnson story, or Jerry Jones story, Dallas Cowboys stories, Tom Landry stories. You know, you just name it. Story. So when the teacher said, your daughter is a master storyteller, I don't think she really even understood what she was saying, the teacher, but man, greatest atta girl ever. And I just put that in my back pocket because I can't think of a greater gift I'd want my daughter to have. I'd rather have C's and D's and have that gift like her grandfather. My dad, storyteller, mesmerizing at a cookout, mesmerizing at a barbecue, just one story after another. And I've learned that skill from him and others. And my daughter, if she has that, you know, it's so funny, the teacher said in the report card, you know, Emery can be distracting at school, right, because of these stories. Well, I never stopped telling her stories, right? She learns history, like where did mommy and daddy meet? What was our first date? How did we get engaged? Tell me about your grandpa. I tell her about my grandpa's general store. I tell her about her grandfather's general store. I tell her about, you know, getting fired coaching pro hockey. I tell her about getting in trouble with the police. I tell her about my first bicycle. I tell her about my teachers in school. That was yesterday's thing at the pizza party, all the different teachers I had. And no ADHD in those days, just these kids are insane, get them outside. And we used to have to go sit out in the hall. There wasn't any experts or therapists really. So my daughter's a voracious reader, which is number one. And now that I found out that she's a master storyteller, well, you know what? I haven't completely messed her up. That's the thing about the Einstein blueprint. You know what? Maybe I'm messing her up. Maybe I'm past the point of no return, teaching her entrepreneurship and all this other stuff, the importance of wealth attraction and all this storytelling and, you know, reading like a maniac and marketing, and maybe I'm messing her up, but at least I'm the one who mess her up. It won't be some fucking expert. It won't be some fucking low-paid school teacher. It won't be some T-ball coach. It won't be some woke folk or some other clown. It'll be Krista and I who set the tone for good or bad. We'll take accountability and responsibility for all of it. But it'll be our show, which is absolutely critical. It'll be our show. If we mess it up, it'll be us that messed it up. And we've invested in guys like Dan Leonis to give us a chance to do the best job we can with the gift we've been given from God. Please watch the podcast below. Please get that book, The Diseasing of America's Children, and read it and take it to heart. And spread the word to those that need to hear it, whether that's your children or your grandchildren. And make sure, like Gordon Quinton said, don't ever, ever, ever let your children, your grandchildren near this life-destroying industry. Just no thanks. We'll exercise, we'll walk, we'll read, we'll de-screen, we'll do all the stuff necessary. But that'll be the last resort. Pills and medication, and even putting that thought in your kid or your grandkid's head. That's what I regret. Even going to that appointment. But since then, not even remembered, not even talked about, took accountability, took control, and fixed what could have been a life-altering bad decision. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed that story. It's an important one. The diseasing of North America's children. The diseasing of North America's children. You're gonna love Roseman. They fucking hate him. They hate him, which is perfect. I don't follow anybody that's popular. I don't follow anybody that's 4-hour work week. I don't follow anybody that's, popular. I run. I embrace the hard. I embrace the cold, hard truth. I don't want to learn from anybody I wouldn't switch places with, and I don't want to learn from anybody that's popular. No thanks. Thank you, no. That's it. If you need some help, buy my book, noblebook.com, my newsletter, badassletter.com, and apply for my world building 12-month mastermind at badassworldbuilders.com. You'll be joined at the hip with me for a year and a whole bunch of other elite men helping you move from 5 figures, 6 figures to 7 figures. Basically, you're going to be going from top 5% as a businessman, husband and father to top 1%. That's what the world building program does. So that's at badassworldbuilders.com. 2 words that change my life, 2 words that'll change your life. Be relentless.